The views and opinions expressed on the Bowling Evolved podcast are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect those responsible for putting the show together. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello, bowling fans. This is Dustin J. Markowitz coming to you taped, as always, from the gym along the Colorado River, Laughlin, Nevada, bringing yet another edition of your favorite bowling show, Bowling Evolved. Joining me, as always, is my partner in crime. He's a 5-time PBA national champion, one of the most decorated left-handers in PBA Tour history, and you know what, also just one heck of a nice guy. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Eric Forkel. Eric, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Dustin. Let's get on to it.
Yep, absolutely. We have a lot to talk about on the show tonight, and we're not going to hesitate at all because our first guest is one of the most prominent figures in bowling today. He's the commissioner of the PBA, and this is the second time he's appeared on our show, the one and only Tom Clark. Tom, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. You know, thanks for having me on, first of all. But I'm going to tell you what I was actually doing, and I think Eric could probably help me, is I want to figure out what was the best purple bowling ball in the history of bowling.
Purple.
Does anything come to mind?
Purple. There was a purple hammer, I believe, at one time. I think there was I think the Rhino, the purple Rhino, I think was that was purple. One of the first resin balls back in the early '90s, I believe that was purple.
What I'm wondering is because we've got to get a purple Rhino. I think that's the perfect one, or any new ball that's purple, and we got to get one to Prince because I just found out last night that Prince is a big bowler. He loves bowling. The singer Prince, and as you know, he's a big purple guy. So if we can get him a purple bowling ball, I think that'll be the next step to getting him closer to being on one of our shows. And I think a lot of people would love to watch him bowl. I'd like to watch him bowl.
It'd certainly be interesting. I'll definitely give you that. Prince bowling. Well, anything's possible, I suppose, in bowling. And with that being said, let's jump right into it, Tom. Now, obviously, you know, the last few weeks has been very interesting, not only for the PBA, but for bowling in general. A lot of news stories, including a few things we've covered here on Bowling Evolved. One thing that we will be addressing more in the latter half of our show tonight, but one of the things we talked about, of course, is the PBA's use of blue oil. Now, I know recently there's been a lot of write-ups on the blue oil, a lot of controversy between the fans, the bowlers, and everyone in between. Tell us, in your personal view, how do you feel the PBA's use of the blue oil went, and do you think it's something the PBA is going to continue to use down the road?
Well, yeah, I do think you're going to see it down the road. I mean, I actually won't be surprised if a few years down the road it's normal. I mean, it won't surprise me at all. I mean, it's just, you know, being able to see it for the first time, and you know, actually when we did some events and some TV shows that didn't have the blue oil, it almost seemed like something was missing. You know, it just, you kind of get used to it that it's there, and you think, well, why wouldn't we have been doing this before? It's because it just makes it easier to educate people as to the what we've always constantly talked about, the invisible, you know, obstacles in bowling. And so actually being able to see it is kind of cool. I mean, and as a bowler, I'll tell you, a lot of people were talking about all the different aspects of it, but just in the most simple sense, as a bowler, it's just kind of cool to see that the lane was definitely oiled. You know, it was oiled correctly and went the right length. I mean, you know, how many times have you just gotten ready to bowl in a league or any time and just even wondered if the lanes were done correctly, let alone done at all? And so being able to walk right out and just see it is kind of cool. The way it originated was, you know, I'm personally constantly looking for ways to make to be able to connect with more people and to educate more people. And one of the things that everybody has always talked about with oil, and is something we talk about ad nauseum in bowling, was, well, I wish we could see it. You know, everybody talks about, I wish you could see it. If you could only see it, and I'd hear people for years, well, could you put this in the oil? Could you do this? Can we turn the lights out? Can we run a machine down the lane in the middle of the game to give people a readout? Can we print out what's going on? You know, and it's a constant struggle. I mean, at one point what I did was I made carpets that actually had the exact pattern designed on a lane-length carpet and put it next to a lane on the unused lane for TV. And we used those for a couple of years, and they were pretty cool. But so finally this year, I just said, well, we've always talked about, what about putting dye in the oil? What about bringing color to the oil? And just what would happen? So I shot a note to Neil Stremmel, who is, the tech guy at USBC and at the national governing body of the sport, and just said, why don't we do this? And he had a couple of negatives, and they just didn't seem that negative to me. So our lane maintenance provider is Brunswick, and I reached out to Brunswick, Corey Dykstra over there, and then eventually Brian Graham and some other great guys at Brunswick like Pat Mitchell, and said, why don't we try this? And apparently they tried it a few years ago, several years ago, and they didn't really like the results, but let's try it again. And we did, and most of the negatives that everyone talked about, that it would be this giant mess, that's the first thing that they said why we shouldn't do it, just really wasn't true. I mean, there was no mess. You cleaned up after one. It cleans up one run down the lane with the cleaner. It gets on your bowling towel, I guess. I mean, it gets on the bowling ball. You can definitely see your track on the ball in blue in this case, because we use blue oil. But it doesn't get all over the pins, and it doesn't get all over your shirt, at least not the dye sublimated shirts. So, that wasn't a problem. And then the only thing that's not perfect about it and isn't ideal is that when there's lower volumes, it doesn't show up that clearly. So at times you'll see, when you watch the shows, you'll see the outside part of the lane where the volume is lower almost appear to be dry, because it doesn't look blue on the outside. But there's definitely oil there, and the ball reads the oil for sure. And so that's probably the one negative right now, but the positives just far outweigh it, and you can see the media's already picked up on it. I mean, Popular Science did a story on it. Yahoo had it as its main sports story today, and so because it's a first and it just looks different, and to a lot of people, you got to remember, most people that watch our show, they actually don't even know there's oil on the lane, let alone patterns and lengths, and that's the reason why we started naming tournaments after the lengths of the patterns and the pattern themselves, because we just wanted people to connect with the idea that this is a different challenge today. It's a different challenge this week than just bowling. It's not just a lane. So many people that are, novices to the game or just casual viewers, think that, why wouldn't they just get a strike every ball? It's just there's the lane and there's the pins. It's the same, right? And so they don't understand the game changes every single ball, that there's different challenges with every single pattern that's put down, and the length certainly shows up with the blue oil, if not the exact nuances of the depth of the volume of the pattern across the lane. But so I'm really proud of it. I think that people will get a kick out of it. I think there'll certainly be the crowd that punches holes in it. But, ultimately, I think it's a win. So, thanks for asking about it.
Well, certainly there is no argument that there has been a lot of buzz about it, obviously, with the news coverage on it. However, I would have to ask, now, the shows have not aired yet, and we are, everyone I'm sure is looking very forward to seeing the shows when they do go on. But there are the naysayers, as I'm sure you well know, that say that somehow the blue oil is cheapening the game, that it takes away from the sport itself, similar to why wouldn't they do something in golf? You don't have to color the greens to show that the grass is going the other way. What would you respond to that?
Well, it doesn't. That's the easiest response. Just ask the bowl. If you don't want to take my word for it, ask a bowler. Ask someone that bowled on it. Ask Sean Rash. Ask Jason Belmonte. Ask Chris Barnes. Trust their word. It doesn't really help you. As Eric would know, the moves, the transitions. If you're trying to say that possibly being able to see the tracks of the ball would enable you to make transitional moves quicker or on more time because you can see it, as opposed to trying to naturally, by instinct, feel it. It doesn't really work that way. I mean, I think that what I think those guys would tell you is that the move needs to be made before you can really see it, and sometimes it has to be made after you can see it. So, if anything, I actually think that potentially it makes it more difficult to bowl, because you're looking at something and saying, "Oh, wait a second, everybody's playing second arrow." I mean, you'll see it on the first show, on the cheetah show. Everybody knows you got to play out on cheetah, but at the arrows, it's kind of at the second arrow is where the ball is, and you'll be able to see that after a while there's just a track, on the second arrow, because you've got great players all playing in the same spot, and they're learning how to track. But the moves aren't made based on looking at the lane. I think most of the players would tell you that they never looked. They didn't use it as a guide. And so I don't think that that's a concern at all.
Eric, based on what Tom said, would you agree with that assessment?
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing the show. I know it'll be on soon, and it should be interesting. I know it's something we talked about years ago. Back in the day, it would be nice to see what the oil, like they do in golf. They know where all the sand traps are and all the water holes, etc. In bowling, that's why we always thought it was more difficult, because you couldn't see anything. So this is interesting in that regard, and I'm curious to see how it plays out.
You can definitely see the laydown areas, and as you know, I mean, that becomes one of the, most important parts of the game. And the players, we don't just run this out, without doing some testing. I mean, there was a lot of testing done to make sure that this was the right thing to do. And I tend to listen to people like Norm Duke when it comes to bowling. So I had Norm come out. It was just Norm and me and Kirk Von Kruger and Sabs, our lane man, and put it down and throw some balls and get his thoughts and get his endorsement. The players are the PBA. Players don't want to let anything go that isn't going to be important for the PBA. And they understand the importance. A guy like Norm understands the importance of a move like this. And so I listened to Norm, and from a playing standpoint, he was most interested in that laydown spot. And I think that he was actually kind of surprised with his own seeing where his ball landed every shot, because it's not as accurate as you would think. It's not like he drops it at the exact spot every time. And I think that was even eye-opening to him, and I think that he thought he could use it to improve his game, not necessarily get an advantage in a game by being able to see those spots. But when you see the laydown spot, the laydown area in the heads get worn down by 16-pound balls hammering it, you understand, like you said, Eric, that there are sand traps, there's water out there, there's danger, and there's divots, and there's obstacles, and it's not the same every shot. And you will never see a player on any of our shows, and they could have if they wanted, but you'll never see someone walk up to the lane and look out over the blue and see, okay, the drop down area is on 6 at 3 feet off the foul line, so I'm going to try to hit 7 at 4 feet off the foul line. It's impossible to do that. So nobody, used it to that degree. I mean, no one even used it, I don't think. You'll see. It just becomes bowling, and for fans at home, which this is really for, it's not for the player. It's for fans at home, and it's only for TV for now. The fans at home will see that there's oil on the lane. And when Randy talks about why the cheetah is XYZ, he can actually point out where the oil is, and it sounds like it makes sense. It's not some invisible thing. And so as an educational tool and as a tool for bringing new viewers to the game, I think it's nice. do I think the ratings will explode and suddenly, the skies will open up and bowling is saved? No, not at all. I just think it's another piece to the puzzle and a constant effort to improve people's understanding of our sport.
Well, you bring up a very interesting point there at the end, is the explosion of bowling. And as we close in on 2014 and a new PBA season is upon us, how is the PBA relating to the new year? How do you see the growth going, and do you think the PBA is going to start to rebound, or do you see that there's still going to be a lot of headaches and hiccups along the way?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by headaches and hiccups. I think I'm going to guess that you mean sponsorship.
For example, yes.
Yeah, well, I think that's the only area where we have a lot of concern, and frankly, I've had that concern for about 15, 20 years. Probably 20 years now. It's been an issue in our sport. I can just tell you what we've done, and what we have ready to start on ESPN here on December 1st, and what the World Series of Bowling was, and the amount of effort across the board in every single area, from revenue generating standpoints, from reaching out globally to digital platforms for webcasting to one of the sponsors of the sponsor of the Viper Championship was actually the PBA Bowling Challenge video game that's on Android and iOS systems and is one of the most popular sports games for phones. Just almost every single area of the sport, I feel like we are, advancing the game, doing a good job. Now, paying the bills for the level of television that we do, which is, we're doing 36 hours on ESPN, and we're doing 10 hours on CBS Sports Network this year. And that's a lot of television. And most niche sports would die for our exposure and our level and our ratings and our level of attention given us by ESPN and by the CBS Sports Networks of the world to beyond that much. But that's an expensive proposition that can only be, paid for by sponsorship, and that is clearly still a challenge. I mean, let's hope we can. Let's hope we can connect with some brands like we are with Geico and like we are with Jack Links and Barbasol, and expand that beyond just the bowling, the great partners that we have in bowling, like Knight and Storm and Brunswick and Motive and all the other track register companies, and that's the only way that the PBA and professional bowling can grow from a prize fund standpoint. So, all we can do there is keep plugging and working extremely hard to bring those brands on board, and deliver the kind of ratings and the kind of demographics really that they desire. People want to reach the 18 to 34 now. I mean, that's kind of the demo that people want to reach, and that's the reason why ESPN is a $1 billion, entity, and because they do reach that viewer. But right now, bowling, and for the last 20 years, bowling skews older than that, and a lot of sponsors shy away when they have so many choices. I mean, a lot of sponsors shy away from any kind of professional sports league or television show that is attracting a predominantly older audience. So we've got to bring new people in, and I think that's why you've seen us, try promotional marketing tools like bringing celebrities in that, have a younger demo following them and have a large following in social media and can help bring people in and tell them, no, bowling's cool. I mean, come on in. Take a look. That's why something like Prince and a purple bowling ball interests me, because Prince throws the ball down the lane. There's a whole demographic of people that think, well, that's pretty cool, when Lenny Kravitz talks to Jimmy Fallon last night about bowling, and that's where I saw it, and he and all they do is talk about bowling and how Prince beat Lenny Kravitz and Prince loves bowling. That type of stuff helps us, and we just got to grab those people. And then when we come to our show, you can't bore them. You know, we've got to make sure that they're entertained. We got to make sure that they understand what's going on and they become fans. So, you know, I think we all know what we've got to do. Now, you know, can I guarantee that we're going to hit sponsorship numbers that's going to propel the PBA in a way that big fans all want it to? You know, got to keep trying.
Well, I definitely think the PBA has reached out to a wider demographic, at least as far as bringing in the celebrities, which I think is fantastic. Now, Eric and I, as well as our guest Paula Vidal a couple weeks ago, we had talked about the sponsorships, and a question I want to ask you, and this is something that we've actually had several people write in about, was the beer sponsors of the past. I had an email that came in, and I wanted to ask you about this, is the PBA against having an alcohol-based sponsor with them? And if not, what is keeping away some of those beer sponsors of the past, considering alcohol, obviously, in most of your local bowling centers is still so prominent? What is keeping them away, if they are, in your opinion, from the PBA?
Yeah. Well, first of all, absolutely, we are absolutely not opposed to having a beer sponsor. I mean, we'd love to have a beer sponsor. And we've had them, and we've had them recently. We've had Miller High Life, we had Budweiser a couple of years ago. Not on a gigantic scale, not on a life-changing scale, but they were a sponsor for us. We had them on our Dorna signage, commercials ran on our shows. And why don't we have one of those beers take us on as a title sponsor or something? I mean, we try. Believe me, we were close with Pabst last year, actually, and I felt really good about it. I had actually met with their marketing team in Los Angeles. They came to the Chris Paul event, which is our best event by far to invite potential sponsors to, because it's in one of the coolest bowling centers in the country at Lucky Strike LA Live, and we have, you know, we have dozens of the coolest people in the country right there, like Kevin Hart and Chris Paul and Blake Griffin and their marketing people and their agents, and you know, you can't find a better vibe, and so they came and they loved it, and they just needed to go in a different direction after that, not from bowling, but just from their advertising scheme. So that didn't necessarily work out, but we were close. I mean, you know, I think what they, you know, in general, what you hear is, you know, they're trying to reach a younger demo. So, and the other thing that you hear constantly from the beer is that they kind of have us already. You know, I think the only way that we could almost collude, you know, to have a beer sponsor is if we could control what bowling centers actually poured, and that's not going to happen. I mean, bowling centers are going to give their customers a choice. They're not going to say, all right, if Budweiser sponsors the PBA, we're only going to serve Budweiser in bowling centers. Now, if we had that, I mean, that would be pretty powerful, but you don't have that. So, you know, believe me, it's not, as you know, I know you didn't mean it this way, but it's not an original thought that we ought to have a beer sponsor. We just don't, and we keep trying, you know, so, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if we got one next week, and I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't have one for the whole year. It's one of those things, you know.
Mm. Well, I'll tell you right now, I think it would be great if, you know, the PBA, the BPAA, the USBC, if everyone could be on the same page, and, you know, we did have that ability in bowling, but unfortunately I think that's something that's still, as much as there is cooperation between the three, that you're never going to see where the PBA could dictate beer in bowling centers, so I have to agree with you on that one.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. I mean, I think we're getting closer. You know, we have ups and downs, you know, with the industry, and I think we're getting closer to working together on these types of initiatives. And Miller has come out as the official beer of bowling with Strike 10. So, you know, that's probably, you know, the best, you know, relationship that we could have if we could develop some programs together. But certainly right now we're open in that category. Yep.
Well, I'll tell you what, it definitely sounds like PBA is still trying.
Just so you know, those the PBA, and I know that we always want to compare it to, I'm not sure what year when everybody thinks it started going down, but clearly when we left ABC in the late 90s, mid-late 90s, was a change. And we didn't leave ABC, we were canceled. I mean, the PBA was canceled by ABC. And it never was sponsors that funded the PBA, even during our heyday. It was ABC. I mean, it was the fact we had a rights fee and we had a network partner, that really appreciated what bowling did for it and was able to profit from it. That the PBA was even at the level that it was at. When we want to remember the heyday, which wasn't. I love when I talk to people like Marshall Holman, and he always tells me, boy, I love when people say that was the heyday and the rich times for bowling, because we didn't think so at the time. We kind of thought, we were hoping it would get better, even when it was at its height. And it was the network, that was really the most important piece, and the fact that our founder Eddie Elias, he founded it on that principle of, well, I'm going to get a deal with ABC and friends that he had there already, and convince them that bowling was great programming. And in the early stages of television, it was. I mean, it was easy to shoot. You didn't need that many cameras. It wasn't that big of a field. It was easier than most other sports to put on television. So it was almost like the perfect situation. And then, as you know, I mean, it's the old story. I mean, once cable TV came and technology improved across the board and how you can televise things, it's a whole different world. And bowling trying to keep up has been difficult, because as soon as ABC said, you know what, we don't need you anymore on Saturday, and we're not going to pay you a rights fee, and we're not going to pay production costs. Well, that forced the guys who were running the PBA at the time, I think Mark Gerbich and Kevin Shippey and those guys, they wanted to keep bowling on TV, but they ran through a lot of money having to pay to be on television and having to pay for production, and they kind of learned what everybody else and every other sport had known for a long time, that if you want to be on TV that much, it costs. And the only way you could make up those costs with revenue is through sponsorship, and it's not an easy model. And we're still really there. So, we keep tinkering, and that's why you see what we have now, to create as much efficiency as possible, but also grow at the same time with things like global expansion. And is it where we want it? No. Do we want taped shows? I know you guys talked about that. No, we don't. I mean, it's a sport. It's a sport. You want it to be live. But what we have been able to do is stay on television. And I think that's critical, for our sport and our game, because as soon as we disappear, I don't know. I don't even want to think about what will happen.
Well, we are closing in on our first commercial break here, and first off, everyone that is listening, please check out PBA.com and all the PBA programming coming up. I know we have all the fantastic events from the World Series of Bowling, some great things coming out. Let me ask you this question as we finish out here, and I think that's a very interesting point about television coverage and the PBA. Obviously, you guys have Extra Frame, you do the live streaming online. Would the PBA be able to survive as an organization if TV did disappear? Do you think there would be a way to keep it going using live streaming and things of that nature if we no longer had network appearances?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it could survive, but I think it'd be a totally different, situation. And a couple of years ago, I tried and ran Extra Frame only national tour stops. We did 4 stops, and believe me, reminds me again of Norm Duke, because I think Norm won 3 of them. I think he loved that extra frame tour. He always reminds me of that. But and that was kind of an experiment because, I kind of thought along the same lines. You got to have a strong fan base, though, and I'll tell you, when you look at streaming today, and you look at everybody that tries to do it, and they do it, it's all live coverage, and other than us, I think, it's all free. I see Bowl.com with Bowl TV do free live streaming, and friends like Mike Flanagan with Inside Bowling has done live streaming, and then you see the guy from Michigan, Craig Elliott, has done live streaming, and all you have to do is watch those shows live and see that, and they do a very good job promoting them, and they do a good job with the programming, as good as they can with an extremely limited budget. The most people that watch these shows at any one time, if it gets over 1,000, it's rare, and when you watch something like The Inside, not even that one, what was the last one? The Detroit Shootout, with Craig Elliott. I watch that. I love bowling, so I watch whatever's on, whenever it's on. And for most of the 2 days it was live streaming, I think the most viewers it had at any one time was about 200. And usually it was around 90. I'm talking about 90 people. And when they got to the finals, and it was a great step ladder, I think Craig Niederfer won. He's in the running for Rookie of the Year on the PBA this year. And he won the tournament, and it was a good step ladder and everything. I think it got to 500, maybe 600 at the most people watching. Now, our television shows that the people in bowling want to, bring down, or they want to talk poorly about them. They average 700 to 800,000 people watching the show, and you can't compare 800,000 with 90 people. So you can't sell advertising against the types of numbers that live streaming is able to deliver. Bowl.com, who has a better promotional platform than USBC, to promote their live streaming of really solid events? The World Cup just was going on from Russia, which might not be a fair test because the hours are so different that it was kind of odd times that it was on, but they're not really getting over 1,000 people watching at any one time when that's going on. And we're talking about bowlers from 70 countries having the opportunity to watch this for free. Or the Queens is a good example. Queens is a great tournament. The USBC puts on the best women bowlers, and at the most, maybe 2,000 at any one time. And when Extra Frame charges, obviously, for a subscription to watch the best bowlers in the world and compete in the best tournaments in the world, and we have about 5,000 to 6,000 subscribers, and our viewership is kind of the same as the free. So it really kind of teaches you from a marketing and a sales standpoint that it really doesn't make sense to be live. To be free. It makes sense to be live, sorry. It makes sense to be free when the viewership is not higher than the paid viewership. It just doesn't really make any sense. If when we did a free show and we had 100,000 people watching a streaming free, PBA event, then we'd be in a different ballpark. Now it'd be time to talk about, well, how can we bring advertising into live streaming? But I guess I just don't see that right now. I wish, believe me, when I tell you that we have 5,000 Extra Frame subscribers, I really have to believe, and I think you guys believe, that we have more than 5,000 fans, that are true fans of the PBA. We have 50,000 unique people check our scores when we have a tournament going on. Like during the World Series, every day, 50,000 different people would come to PBA.com to look at live scoring and updates in scoring. So we know that many people care enough to come and see who's winning the Cheetah Championship, or what's the standings in the World Championship, that kind of thing. And we have 2 million people per year that come to PBA.com, and we have those 800,000 that watch the television show. But we know that those people are not all avid fans. But you got to believe that there's more avid fans than 5,000. So if we could grow Extra Frame to be 10,000 or 20,000, and it was still a pay service, that would have an impact on our ability to do more tournaments for players. Because unlike what I think I heard you guys talking about last week, I mean, believe me, that was all over the place. But what I think I heard you guys talking about was somehow that the PBA was, I don't know what you meant, but maybe taking money or something. I mean, or profit-driven, or whatever you want to say. The only reason that we want money, I mean, the only reason that we try to generate revenue is to put it back into the product, and to put it and to have more events, and to pay the players more. The players are the PBA. I mean, that's all we want to do. We want to put into the product. There hasn't been a profit in the PBA in, since ABC left. So it's just the furthest thing. And it's not like there's this kitty being built of money that we're somehow raking or something. I'm not sure what you were alluding to, but it just doesn't exist. I mean, what we're trying to do is build the PBA through revenue generation. That's all.
Well, I believe what you're referring to is more or less our guest last week, and of course, I'm sure if you're listening this week, you probably have heard our last week's show, which Eric and I will be addressing a little bit more on the second half of the show tonight, was Grady Merritt Foster comparing the non-profit organization to the for-profit organization, how the PBA has changed since then, at least in his opinion, and what other people seem to see that as. Before I let you go, I do want to ask one question, though. One thing that you mentioned very interesting, that there isn't a lot of people watching these shows live on the live streaming, which I can definitely understand and see. My question for you is, do you know what the numbers are for people who watch the shows that are archived? I mean, for example, on YouTube, I know a lot of people will look up the old shows from the 70s and 80s that have been uploaded, and you see, 5,000 views, 10,000 views, things like that. What kind of archive views do you have with Extra Frame?
We know the exact numbers. They're not life-changing. It's not like thousands more watch on archive than would live. That doesn't happen. Now, the PBA also has a YouTube page, and you can see the number of views we get. I mean, the number of views total for a PBA YouTube page, I'd have to look at it, but it's, obviously in the millions, and we just did a deal with Google, which owns YouTube. It was fun to go down to that office in Manhattan and meet the Google people and the YouTube people and work together with them and be able to now monetize, the hits on our YouTube page, the views on our videos. And as you know, I mean, I know it bothers people, but it's like the fact that people can just put up the content that we pay for on their own YouTube page. I mean, now everything that we do will be coded, so when other people put up PBA content that we paid for on YouTube pages, it will actually credit us when people watch their videos. So I'm happy about that. It enables people to keep putting up videos whenever they want, but at least we get credited for it, and it'll help our bottom line. So, we've definitely done a job with them. I think, and people have struggled with that all the time. It's like, let's say we've done the World Championship last year. Let's say it does a 0.7 on ESPN, and that's 900,000 viewers. And then a year later, look on YouTube, and that show has, let's say, 100,000 views. So does that mean 1 million people watch that show? It's interesting, and believe me, we definitely put that in front of sponsors and say, look, we have a great viewership on YouTube, actually, and we try to monetize that as well, and tell people, look, when you buy this advertising or sponsorship and get involved with the PBA, you also benefit from exposure in this medium. So, but on Extra Frame, the actual archived viewership, we know the exact numbers, and it's solid. It's a lot of people go back and watch themselves. Some people do that, and find themselves and watch. And a lot of people that didn't have a chance to watch it live can go back and watch, 8 hours of bowling in one day from the World Series at their leisure. And so it's a decent number, but it's not like it's off the charts or anything like that.
Like I said, I think it's very interesting. I think the YouTube thing, obviously, we are a YouTube-based program ourselves, and Facebook, which, of course, for anyone listening, please check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/bowlingevolved. Eric, there's our shameless self-promotion for the night.
gotta have one of those.
But with that being said, that is going to bring us into our commercial break. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in thanking Mr. Tom Clark for coming on the show. Tom, as always, it's a pleasure having you on. Thank you for sharing your opinions and your viewpoints on the PBA.
Thanks. I mean, God, last week Eric was talking. He must have talked the whole time. He didn't ask me one question, I don't think, this week. I mean, he was all over. I mean, we were talking about the Messiah. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was great. I enjoyed that. The only thing I didn't enjoy about that show was this question that, is the PBA bad for bowling? Is that what you asked? Something like that.
We had
is the PBA good for bowling? And I mean, and I think the answer that came out from you guys was that it was. It was bad for bowling. It's just, and I'll tell you, and the reason why that hurts me is I think of Russ Mills, I think of Gary Mage and Sam Zurich and Rich Weber and John Weber and Pete McCordick and Bobby Jekyll, and Kirk Von Kruger. And these guys are the best tournament directors in the country, and they're putting on 180 tournaments a year, and putting on senior tournaments and regionals and senior regionals, and there's so much credibility and integrity in every event that they do for years and years, and the players of the PBA that really devote themselves to the game and play it at the highest level of competitive bowling in the world, and really set the standard for what professional bowling is, with the most prestige and the best competition. And I mean, and as Eric knows, it's where the legends are made. Billy Hardwick died this week. I mean, that's our heritage. That's what defines the PBA, are people like that. And we're the first that tell the world about that. We write the press release about it. We work. We make a video tribute about Billy Hardwick, and make sure as many people know so they are aware of what happened, and it gets in the New York Times. And when you just look at the amount of work, and we talked about PBA.com and the YouTube page and live scoring and extra frame and a membership of 3,000 players, and I mean, and that video game and the media outreach. This week we're in all kinds of, I mean, Belmo is in ESPN the magazine, a full page, a great photo spread of Belmonte, and if we had bought an ad in ESPN the magazine, it would cost $250,000. It doesn't show up there without the PBA. And Clara is going to be on the December 1 show. There's going to be a full story on her in USA Today next week. If we bought an ad in USA Today, it would cost $100,000. And that's promoting bowling and getting people to understand about our sport. And I don't know. When I hear something like that, it definitely bugs me. And when you come back from the World Series of Bowling, and there's 21 different countries there, and I mean, and they're represented, and to them, it's just the greatest moment of their lives that they have the opportunity to bowl next to Norm Duke and Pete Weber and Parker Bone. I mean, that's the PBA. And then to have anybody say, the PBA isn't any good for bowling. I mean, I'm sorry. But,
let me
that was weak.
No, I completely understand your viewpoint, and let me interject here for just a second. I'm going to delay our commercial here. And obviously, for our listeners that did not hear last week's show, Tom is actually referring, we had a reader write into us with the question which we do our controversy of the week, which is the PBA still good for bowling? Now, the opinions that were expressed, obviously, from Grady Merritt Foster from iGrind Bowling, which was expressing that he did not think the PBA was still good for bowling, was very well publicized, as many people would attribute to who listened last week, including yourself, Tom. And obviously, Eric and I do have our opinions on the PBA. We both support the PBA, and if you listen to our shows, that much is obvious. And again, as far as with Grady's stance, I don't know. From your opinion, I will say this. Do you think that someone like iGrind, for example, and as much as you can get into it, do you think that they're maybe biased when they're looking at the PBA, or is there an underlying cause as to why they would think that?